Hello and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. My name is Andrew Claudio, aka GMAC, and it's time for another preview of a Knicks upcoming matchup, this time against the surging Cleveland Cavaliers. It's been a while since we played this basketball team. In fact, it was a Halloween back-to-back when we asked questions like, can they handle Mitchell Robinson? Is this the RJ Barrett leap? We'll quickly find enough minutes. Oh boy, have times changed for both teams since then. You know what we do every time we talk to, anytime the Knicks play the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it's we head to the fine folks over at the Chase Down podcast to preview this matchup. And the first leg of this home and home is here at Knicks Film School. And joining me to preview this matchup, he's back, ladies and gentlemen, from the Chase Down, one half of the Chase Down, Mr. Justin Rowan. Justin, welcome back, my friend. How have you been?
I'm doing well, Andrew. Thank you for having me back. Rowan Barrett is no longer part of it, but we still got one Rowan in this rivalry. So I'm happy to be here. It's been a weird season. The fact that these games between the Cavs and Knicks have been so spaced out, and unfortunately, we're once again, for the second year in a row, not going to get a sample of what these teams look like healthy playing against each other in the regular season. So there's going to be a lot of questions. I think we're still in a spot where these two teams are likely. I don't think last year is going to be the last playoff series we will see between these teams. I think they're going to be around for a while. So we're going to get answers at some point. It's just not going to come on Sunday.
No, it's fair to say that it's not going to come on Sunday, because I also mentioned that the Cavs played the Detroit Pistons last night. We're recording this on Saturday afternoon, and Donovan Mitchell didn't play. I believe Caris LeVert also didn't play. Yeah. Because it's the Pistons, although they've played better recently. The Cavs were able to still come away with the victory. They're 39-20 on the season. I messaged you the day that it was December 14th, the day that it seemed to be a bit of an Armageddon for the Cavs, who were struggling at the time. I know both of us were talking about how rough the schedules were to start the year, and how the Cavs schedule was about to lighten up, but like they lost Darius, Garland, and Evan Mobley to injuries on the same day. And like we were like, do they hit a nuclear button, or do they? And you were like, you know what, at a certain point, maybe, but they're going to try and get through this next stretch, hopefully with an easier schedule. And the run that they've gone on, they're still 39. They're 39-20 at this point, but they're still up there at all the net ratings, and the defense is really good. Mitchell solidified himself as a legitimate superstar in this league, probably first or second all-NBA this year if he qualifies for games. And I have a thing I point to for certain teams, what I call DVD moments. What I mean by that is anytime you get the championship DVD, like I grew up on the Yankee Dynasty, and going through those videos or DVDs when they'd come out, you'd recognize certain points in a season that get highlighted and brought up during the DVD. And like the Max Strus shot the other night is a DVD moment, you know, like that's why I think the two Knicks seasons that they've made the playoffs were so like saddening to see them end, because they had so many DVD moments throughout the year. And like, I'll ask you, because of how they overcame that stretch without Garland, without Mobley, to what it's been now, they made it being a 2 seed. Does this year feel special? Like how are the vibes right now in Cleveland?
I think it feels special in some ways. Other ways, it's been frustrating just because we haven't, and you guys are going through this too, we haven't been healthy for a consistent period of time. So even though it's worked in stretches and you've had kind of the highs that you've had, you know, ultimately in the playoffs, you're going to need to have that chemistry locked down where it's second nature, where you're making the reads. And like one of the big things over that stretch was the Cavs prior to that, I think their fourth most used lineup had only played like 38 minutes together, and it was 30 games into the season. And over that stretch, their starting lineup got to play together every single game, and they kind of developed that second nature chemistry. Everything was rolling. So you still want to get on the same page. And we don't know if Donovan Mitchell and Caris LeVert are going to play against the Knicks on Sunday. Isaac Okoro left the Detroit game with some back issues. So hopefully he's healthy or at least available to play against the Knicks. but you want to kind of get that chemistry in. But I think there's been enough proof of concept this season to make Cavs fans feel good about the moves that they made, the depth that they were able to add in the offseason, because that was such a big talking point. And it does feel special, but I think there's also a learning curve for us as Cavs fans, because over like this century, pretty much, we've either had a rebuilding team or we've had pressures on we're a contender. We have LeBron James. We don't know what to do with a young, improving playoff team that's still like, there's a growth curve. Like you take 2 steps forward, sometimes you take a step back, then you take 3, then you take 2 steps back. Like that is a new experience. So I think learning how to quantify that and figuring out what is and isn't real, it has been a bit of a test. But I mean, from my perspective, I love it. But I think that has led to some of the tension you have this season. And of course, the questions about Donovan Mitchell, the questions about the fit, all of that kind of stuff is also kind of on the periphery. So it's definitely been a fascinating year to cover.
So I'm going to just give you a heads up now. I don't have a question about Donovan Mitchell on this episode, like future Donovan Mitchell questions. I'm making this a Donovan Mitchell future free podcast. The question about fit actually goes to something I'm curious about. Did seeing how well it worked during that stretch without Garland, where it was like Mitchell all the time, you never had to have him play off ball. Like, what was your takeaway from that? Was there any hint of like, oh, this might work better? Or was it just, thank God he was able to do this during this stretch?
It wasn't this can work better, because their net rating in their minutes together was still better, like the Garland Mitchell minutes. And that was one of the encouraging things, because early in the season, both Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland were dealing with hamstring injuries. Darius, I believe in his first game back from the hamstring injury at the start of the season, injured his shooting hand and like was kind of going through that stretch where he wasn't taking any threes and trying to get to the rim and draw fouls and kind of supplement that. And then obviously broke his jaw. So that wasn't my takeaway. My takeaway was, and this was one of the issues that I had earlier in the season, was every time Darius was off the floor and Mitchell was the solo ball handler, it was more stagnant than it had been in the past. Like they had got away from running their offense. You look at the historical numbers, anytime Mitchell was on the court without a point guard, those lineups didn't do well. You look at last year's season, and when Garland was on the court, they had the second best offense in the league. When he was off the court, it was the 29th. Like it was dramatic, right? And Mitchell wasn't able to carry those lineups. So for him to improve at age 27 to be good enough to be a primary ball handler, that was one of my main takeaways from that stretch, because I think that if this is going to work, you need to have both of those guys being able to run the offense and basically be the only point guards on the roster, where you have, the wings when you're staggering and you can kind of go small ball at that time and throw different looks. You want these guys to be dueling banjos where, either can play on or off the ball. And I think it was a step in the right direction.
So to your point, to anybody listening at home, the stats you're talking about, that the net ratings are the same, whether they're on the court together or with Mitchell on and Garland off, just did the clean the glass filter, and Mitchell on, Garland off, plus 10 in those lineups. Mitchell and Garland together, plus 9.4. So it's quite literally identical in that stretch. So you nailed it in the fact that it doesn't seem to be a vast difference in the minutes or specifically possessions that they have around the court together. I had it looked up. I looked it up yesterday, so I forgot exactly what the number was, but I knew it was absurd. But their record since December 14th, 26-9. That's the second best record in the NBA. The only team better is the team with the best record in the NBA, and that's the Boston Celtics, who are 30-7 in that stretch. So literally been the second best team in the NBA since losing 2 of their key starters. And then, of course, getting them back. Now, some might say, because I've heard this all year, that they were taking advantage of bad teams. And when I say I've heard this, it's because that's what the Knicks have been doing this year against teams above 500, under 500. The Knicks are 23-2. The Cavs are 25-3. Now, you guys are better against teams over 500 than us. But I've heard that critique in the past, and I've just been like, you take advantage of who's on your schedule. That's actually a skill to take care of teams who are under 500. I think if the Bucks had done that with a similar efficiency that our teams had, maybe they'd be comfortably in the 2 seed instead of struggling to catch up to the Cavs this season. Where are expectations? Now, I know we talked about this back in October, but, with everything that's happened this year, and look, it's actually pretty cool to hear you say that, like, it's actually fun to have a season where it's not we're tanking or championship, but like to a reality I expect this team to be in the second round this year. I expect this team to have a chance at a conference final. Like, where are expectations among Cavs fans right now?
I think the expectation is still to win around it, and I'm happy you brought up that record above 500 because there is, like, when you look at it, there's a lot of context. Like when they played earlier in the season against like Indy without Garland, Allen, and Mitchell a couple times, and then the same thing happened with OKC. Like a lot of those are weird, and the thing that's been encouraging to us is like when you filter clean the glass against the top 10 in point differential, the Cavs are 5th in the NBA when it comes to their net rating against, the best teams in the league. Their half court and offense and defense improves against better competition. It's actually the middle 10 where they've really struggled. Like they've kind of taken care of business against the worst teams. The middle, for whatever reason, they haven't got up for it at the same level, but they've been good against the best teams. So I think when you look at this season, the expectation is absolutely they have to win around. Like, I think that's the most important thing. And then from there, I think the most important thing is not getting punked in the second round. Like, I think they have to show that they can hang with any team in the league, because if you go out and you win around against Orlando or whoever, and then you get outclassed in the second round, that makes you start to question, okay, like, does this fit work? Do we have to start considering changes that are a little more than cosmetic? If you have a competitive series where you're playing Milwaukee, you're playing Boston, you're playing the Knicks or whoever, and it goes 7 games, and whether you win or lose is really on the margins, that you can start to convince yourself, okay, you're going to get another year of internal growth. This was a little bit of a weird season. Evan Mobley's still 22 years old. Darius just turned 24. Okoro's 23. Like we can improve. We have our mid-level exception, a full mid-level exception again this summer. You can add another piece. You can even make a consolidation trade. You have your first round pick you can trade on draft night. Like you can talk yourself into it. So I think showing that they belong is the most important thing. And if we can get that proof of concept that the core works together, and it's just about finding the right support players and them growing to be better when they're on the court together, I think you can consider that a successful season.
So this begs a follow-up. What happens if the successful season doesn't happen? What if they lose in the first round?
Man,
is that the $1 million question? Like, is it way too early to even consider what that is?
That is a question for people that get paid a whole lot more than me, because, the question would then become, how did they lose? Like, what were kind of the leading causes there? Was it something that is a trend beyond what we've seen this season? Like that would be the real question. Like, I think, obviously they've done a good job bringing in shooters and improving the space, and the depth is good. Like the depth went from an issue one way to now we're trying to figure out, okay, who actually makes a 9-man rotation? Can we go 10? I don't think you can go 10 when you have 2 guys coming off the bench that deserve like 26, 28 minutes in Caris, LeVert, and Isaac Okoro. Like you just can't, like you run out of minutes at some point. So I think that would be a tough question. But for me, like I feel very confident that at this point, I think this is the best spot for Donovan Mitchell. I think he's going to be back on the Cavs next year. If you ask me, I still believe in the core. Like historically, like this year has been weird, but when you look at the overall numbers of the last 2 years, they've always been better individually and collectively when they're on the court together. So I think it's really just about everybody refining their groove, and hopefully, they can make the most of these remaining 23 games. Yeah,
The interesting thing about the Cavs that I've noticed, I'm curious if you have either noticed it, and if you have, if you're annoyed by it. Like I see the net rating, I see how good they've been against like they just don't lose. Like that's one thing that we had talked about sometime in January that like I just like, okay, so the Cavs are just not going to lose again. That game they lost to the Sixers right before the break actually it actually, like, the stunning part about it was that I thought they were just going to go into the break on a 14-game winning streak because I just didn't see another loss on their schedule. And like, they're the 2 seed in what was supposed to be a very like concrete Eastern Conference. And like, they've kept the run going that the Knicks were supposed to have once they got the Anunoby trade. The Knicks have gotten the attention from the national media and the narrative that like, oh, when they're healthy, this is a conference finals team. Yet the Cavs have performed, because that was the thing I kept refreshing. Like, anytime I go to the advanced stats page and it's like, oh, since X, this is what the Knicks net rating is. It's great. It's just one right behind the Cavs. So this is their defense since the trade. It's just right behind the Cavs. And it's like, I need to start taking them more seriously. So my question is like, does the fact that it seems, now this may just be my perspective here, it seems like how they went out in the playoffs to what you just mentioned last year means that, I don't want to say people aren't taking them seriously this year, but there's a hint
I
of,
think that's fair to say. Like,
but like, it's a hint of, you got to prove it to me this year. Is that so that's fair to say? Like, does it bother you that part of what they've done this season hasn't been taken seriously?
No, like I'm going to complain about it a little bit on like Twitter and stuff like that because, you know, that's what we do as fans. But like, intellectually, no, it doesn't bother me because that's the experience. And like, to some extent, it's funny because all of last season, I looked at the net ratings and all that. I was like, yes, these are like the hallmarks of a contending team. But experience always matters in the playoffs. Like I kept saying, they're going to get embarrassed at some point in the playoffs because that's what happens to young teams. I just thought, you know, maybe it was going to be in the second round. Maybe the matchup wasn't going to be as difficult as it ended up being. But like, that's something we all kind of intellectually know. Like, I think it's going to happen to OKC this year, despite how good they are. They just don't have playoff experience outside of Shea. So I get that, and I think it's like common knowledge amongst NBA fans. But then when you see a team in a market you don't care about lose in that way, it's okay. Well, we don't have to really pay attention to them until like they prove otherwise. And you know, Philly will still get the benefit of the doubt even if they go out sad in the playoffs because you know you got Joel Embiid, best player matters. It's a market that people know and they trust. But from a Cavs perspective, like that's what comes with expectations. Like, when you come up short of expectations, people are going to doubt you. When you got tension and outside pressures, like trying to figure out, okay, is this going to break up? You got fans of teams that want to get Jared Allen, so they're rooting for that. You got fans of teams that want to get Donovan Mitchell, so they're rooting for that. You got fans of teams now that want Darius Garland, so it's the backcourt doesn't work. Like we got to break that up. Like, you're going to deal with that. When you have good players, people are going to cover them. When you come up short of expectations, people are going to doubt you. Like that's the sports experience. So I'm hopeful, that they can prove teams wrong. I think this team is good enough and has an outside chance to make a really deep playoff run. I think Boston's probably the best team in the league, and I hate that because it's Boston.
It's Boston.
But I think they would have a puncher's chance even in a series against the Celtics. Like I put them and the Knicks in the same type of category, that if these teams get healthy and they get hot at the right time, if they get the breaks, like I before the season, my hope was that they were in the 2015 Warriors space where you have enough to make a run if you get the right breaks. And of course, the Warriors played 4 rounds where the opposing starting point guard got hurt. Kevin Love got hurt. They got the breaks and they went out and won the championship. I don't foresee that happening for the Cavs, but I think, from a talent standpoint, I think them and the Knicks are in a very, very similar point where if they get the right breaks and if they play well at the right times, they can go on a very deep playoff run.
You seem to have that 2015 Warriors run memorized from my perspective. Oh,
yeah. There's no reason why I would have reasons to slander the Warriors, like just kind of Rolodex of slander there. No.
It's funny. I just talked to Sam over at Light Years because the Knicks just played the Warriors on Thursday, and reflecting on their run, and like I didn't bring up any of the breaks that they've gotten, but it's like that's the footnotes of any dynasty usually do involve some breaks like that. And look, that's why the Boston,
it's stupid to talk about sports like only one team is made up of winners and like it's a genetic thing of whether you win or lose. No, like luck is a factor, especially in today's like 3-point heavy NBA. Like shooting variance is going to matter a whole hell of a lot.
I got to be honest, that's the only thing that would come into play for me with Boston, because if they're healthy, like the 3-point variance is the only thing I personally see stopping them. Like our teams, like I think both teams could end up having great seasons, and like you said, one of us could end up in the conference finals against Boston. If they're healthy, I don't see a weakness on that team. It's literally the only team that could beat them is them. And if they're just like missing threes,
historically they've done that, right? Like the thing about Boston, the thing I've enjoyed about the Cavs, even when they got 3-point heavy throughout this run, which has been the way they've wanted to play all season, they still get good rim pressure, right? Like they consistently play defense. They still get those high quality attempts at the rim. And that kind of supplements when they have these off shooting nights. Like they almost beat Milwaukee one of the games without Garland and Mitchell, or Garland and Mobley, because even though they shot like 11% from three, they were right there because they were still, attacking the basket, getting enough of that offense. Boston's great on drives, but they just don't do it a whole lot. Like they don't get that consistent rim pressure. So I think they're a little more reliant on variance. But again, like this is me rationalizing and trying to find ways that the Boston Celtics are going to come up short, because I don't want to see them hoisting the trophy, but probably the most likely outcome of this season.
That would be, if I had like an imaginary $100 chip right now, I'd probably put it on Boston. But like I mean, hot take there. I think the team with the best record in the NBA might win the title, So non-Boston division, let's take Boston out of the equation. Go through like the next 3 or 4 teams that scare you the most in a first round matchup to get away from the most disappointing outcome of this season, right? So go through it. Like you're the 2 or the 3 who don't you want to see in the 6 or the 7?
Who I don't want to see in the 6 or 7?
Yeah, so obviously Milwaukee would be out of it. So Philly is Philly with Embiid. I'm assuming where you want to go.
Yeah. If there's no Embiid, then I don't care. That would be my number one pick to play against. But if Philly with Embiid would be really annoying to go through the season and get the 2 seed and they'd follow the play-in. Like that would be incredibly frustrating outcome of this season. Cavs have played well against Philly when they're healthy, but you want to have an easier matchup. After that, this is going to be a little controversial, especially with the Zombie Heat starting to play better. But I think it's Indy just because of that 3-point variance kind of standpoint. I know they're a little different without Buddy, but I feel like Pascal Siakam has the potential to like get Mobley in foul trouble at times, and they can just have a weird shooting series. I know this is going to sound stupid, but I'll put Indy ahead of Miami, and then it's Miami, and then Orlando would be my preferred matchup for sure.
So I'm just going to paint this picture here for you. Like there's a world the Knicks dropped to 6 or 7. So the Knicks getting healthy at that time, where does that factor into your rankings?
That would be high because I have if the Knicks are healthy, so if we're talking about the playoffs with the blanket assumption, all of these teams are healthy and clicking, right? I have the Knicks above the Bucks.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I believe in you guys a lot. Like if that's the 4 or 5 matchup, Milwaukee and Knicks, which for a second it looked like that might be the case.
For like a minute there, I was like, oh, this could get fun.
Oh, that would be pretty sweet. I'm okay with that. But no, I trust the Knicks just a hair more. And it's tough for me because so many times, like I think back to 2018 where the Cavs did not have the better team in a lot of those series, and the best player just ended up mattering more. And Giannis is having such a great season. And again, like the foul trouble concerns because he's going to halfback dive every single play. Like that type of stuff is concerning to me. But I have the Knicks over Milwaukee, but then the Bucks are right behind them. Then it's Philly, and then it's, probably on a confidence scale, I should put Miami, but yeah, I'll put Miami above them, even though I'm contradicting myself from 2 minutes ago.
I've gone such back and forth with Miami this year because like they're still the boogeyman for me. They're the Patriots, but I recognize that they're like the Cam Newton Patriots at this point. Like they don't have Brady in my mind. I guess you could say Jimmy is Brady in a weird comp that I'm making here, but like I just respect the jersey and the culture, and Like the zombie heat, as you're mentioning, Spo's really the thing I'm respecting here.
That's the biggest factor. Like for me, the tough thing is the Cavs have played Miami so well. Like last year, the Cavs struggled in all those matchups against the Knicks, except for the one where they just hit every three and it was okay at the start of the season. They didn't have that issue against Miami. Like Bam is such a big key to their success. And the Cavs have two big men that are like 3 inches taller than Bam and move just as well as him and are like all defensive type guys. Like that matchup just hasn't really bothered me. Like their strengths aren't at the Cavs' pain points. And that just, it's given me a level of confidence. Like there's a sick part of me that wants Miami to be the 7th seed because I know I said getting out of the first round is the most important thing, but I feel like from a narrative and a confidence standpoint, the Cavs beating Miami, even if it's a tougher series than some of those teams, I think that would change perception a little bit more than if they went out and beat Orlando and then had a tough series against Boston or New York in the second round that they lost. Like I think getting that feather in the cap would mean a lot.
It's literally what the Bucks did a couple of years ago when they won their title. Is they knocked off the defending East champs, and then that set them up for this matchup in the second round against the Nets that turned out to be one of the better 7-game series that we've seen. I think I actually want to clarify this for the Knicks Film School audience, that because I've talked way too much about the Heat on these pods of when I've had this conversation. It's not so much that I'm afraid of them, like that the Knicks can't beat them, and I'd be afraid of them more than I would Milwaukee or Boston. It's like it's more to like a risk averse tendency that I have, that it's like if they lose, like if obviously I think the Knicks would have a easier time against the Heat than they would against the Bucks, but like it would be an honor to lose to Giannis and be like, you know what, best player in the series won. Like even if the Sixers were to, you know what, best player in the series won. If they lost to the Cavs, you know what, they've been great all year, they're the better team. They lose to the Heat, I have to live with the fact that they lost to the Heat again, and that's the psychological and the emotional standpoint that I don't want to get to.
Let me ask you this, because we played this game on the chase down during the All-Star break, where we were talking about the top teams in the East and what our biggest fear against all of them was. And this was my answer for the Knicks, and I want to know if it's your same answer for a Miami matchup. My biggest concern against the Knicks is the Cavs themselves, that they would get away from their style of play and try to prove themselves a little too much because of how last year went, like getting outside of what they're doing offensively, like trying to put the team on their shoulders, like trying to muck up the game to prove that, you know, we're more physical than we were last year, and like just getting away from their identity because of the history there. Is that what you would feel against Miami?
To an extent, I'm assuming in a series against the Heat, the Knicks are healthy, that we're saying here, because that means the Knicks got back up to 3 and the Heat got up to 6, right? Or maybe this is the 4-5, but like Anunoby's back, Randall's back, even Mitchell Robinson might be back. Hartenstein's playing something close to what he was for a large stretch of this season. The healthy version of the Knicks, I got to be honest, the only fear I have against the Miami Heat is that they'll go full Heat culture and 2 to 3 Knicks might get injured in that series. But
that's how I feel when we play Toronto. So I feel you.
So you get it. Like there's just there's a thing that look, Julius Randle's ankle injury last year happened against the Heat. And then in the playoffs, down goes Emmanuel Quickly. Injured goes RJ Barrett. Injured goes Mitchell Robinson. What happens this year? Dislocated shoulder by Julius Randle against Jaime Jaquez Jr. Yep. So there's a hint of like the better team should win. And I think that's the ceiling that the Anunoby version of this team took us to, that even the Heat nonsense, the Heat boogeyman doesn't matter. Yep. But, you know, I think the biggest fear I would have in a series like that, I can't believe I'm taking it to this small a margin, but like I think Spo just has the coaching advantage over Tibbs in a significant way, because he's willing to try certain things that Tibbs isn't willing to. Like Tibbs, it was begging for this to be a Hartenstein series last year against the Heat, and like he just like kept going to Mitch, and Spo just neutralized the offensive rebound impact. That anytime you got an offensive rebound, all right, we're fouling you immediately and putting you at the line. You're going to crash 3 on the boards. All right, we're leaking out the other way in transition. So every time we Kevin Love gets an offensive rebound, he knows Jimmy's leaking out for 2 points. You're going to play Jalen Brunson 48 minutes. Great. Gabe Vincent's full court pressing him on the inbounds pass. And those little margins, I think, is where like I'd give the Knicks an advantage, give the Heat the advantage. Now, talent wise, like Randall also didn't show up last year. And Randall also was playing with an ankle injury. So like that I think was a bigger margin that they lost, but that sounds that the Heat, it's very much an emotional and a psychological worry. Basketball wise, there's matchup worries that I have against the Cavs and the Bucks and potentially the Celtics too, So I think those are the bigger worries I have there. I will say, as we pivot into this matchup, specifically on Sunday night. So who's playing for the Cavs in this game? So you had messaged me that Mitchell might not play. I thought that he was taking a night off against the Pistons, and then you enlightened me that it could be a more serious quad injury. So your best guess.
I don't know how serious it is, but the Cavs have taken it's not based on anything. It's just based on how they've approached injuries this season, where Jared, one of my biggest concerns coming into this season was when Jared Allen missed preseason the first few games of the year with a foot issue, right? Like a bone issue in his foot. I was like, that's the type of thing that can linger all season. Then he gets shut down for surgery. And the way that they managed it, of really being cautious, bringing him back, minute restriction for the first 2 months of the season for him, they really managed that well, and he hasn't shown any ill effects, and he's having the best season of his career. And Isaac Okoro had that with his knee, and they've managed that very cautiously, and he's been good. So I just wouldn't be surprised with Mitchell dealing with the knee issue that, hey, you haven't looked the same since the All-Star break physically. You're not really getting to the rim. You're settling for threes. Let's be cautious. This is an important matchup against the Knicks, but this isn't the matchup that's going to tell us anything. The Knicks have been so hurt that they're not themselves either. We probably still have enough to be competitive and go out and win this game, even though, it's going to be harder without Mitchell. So it wouldn't surprise me if both he and LeVert missed, but I assume they're going to be game time decisions. Caris LeVert's dealing with a elbow injury to his shooting arm. And then Isaac Okoro, we just don't know. His back tightened up. Maybe they were just playing it safe because it was Detroit. He took a hard fall in the first quarter and played for a while after that, but then they shut him down. So hopefully Okoro can play, because that's tough. If you're down Mitchell and LeVert already in the backcourt and then losing Okoro, you're running out of bodies, and you'd be going very heavy with Sam Merrill and Craig Porter Jr.
Sam Merrill on the corners this year is shooting 55% from three.
He's ridiculous. He's
where'd you find this guy?
That release is so fast. And it's funny because we touched on it earlier, where Carter and I were advocating going down from a 10-man rotation to a 9. And I think in an ideal world, you'd want Sam Merrill to be part of that because he's such a prolific shooter. But the glut of their talent is in the backcourt, right? Darius, Garland, Donovan Mitchell are going to get a ton of time, right? They're occupying all of those point guard minutes and a lot of the shooting guard minutes. Caris LeVert's probably a top 5 candidate for 6th man of the year. He's been great. Isaac Okoro, if they cared about defense, would be a top 5 candidate for 6th man of the year. But, he's shooting 40% from three. He's a lockdown defender, and he's improving as a passer and rebounder. He's been terrific this season. So you have all of those guys that you'd have to take one of them off of the court to get Merrill on. And that just gets tough because there's just more of an opportunity for Dean Wade and George Niang to get those backup 4 minutes. And, as some Cavs fans will advocate for, okay, we'll just cut Niang from the rotation and put Merrill in. It changes the floor balance a little bit. And you also have to factor in that Niang has among the most playoff experience out of anyone on this team. And as we found out last year, just because something works in the regular season doesn't mean it's going to translate to the playoffs. So having that guy with that toughness, with the playoff experience, that matters. He was a guy that was personally recruited for Donovan Mitchell. Cleveland's not a market that gets free agents typically. So if you get a free agent signing and then you just bench him in year 1 of the contract, that becomes tough. So I think there's a political aspect to that. There's a basketball reason in terms of experience. So, the plus side is Sam Merrill stays ready and he's helpful, but man, it's the opposite issue of last year, where you go into the playoffs and, all right, what are our options coming in off the bench? Isaac Okoro, who's missed a month straight and was questionable with the injury, hadn't played in forever. Dean Wade couldn't lift his shooting arm above his shoulder because he had torn his shoulder, and Danny Green coming off like a shattered leg. Like, you just didn't have the depth. So this year, we are running into the questions that you were just talking about with Tibbs, where now JB has a ton of levers to pull, and we haven't seen him in that situation. So what's that going to look like in a playoff context?
Yeah, the thing I always thought about with the Cavs, I mean, we did the pod last year where we were talking with Carter about like where you rank everybody. And I was like, I think the Knicks, like the Cavs may have 4 of the best 6 or 7 players in the series, but after you get to 4, I think the Knicks have 8 of the best 11 or 8 of the best 13 or whatever the breakdown came to. Because after the 4th guy, I saw such a drop off. And when, like we talked about this in the pregame shows before the year, when I was on with you, that like the Strus, the Niang, the different places they can go to. And then you throw a Merrill into the mix. Like I didn't even mention Dean Wade, Knicks Film School favorite. Thanks to Fred Cass, that he's shooting 43% from the corners and 40% overall this season, that you just have so many other options that you have to honor. And I think, it's funny. I know we were going to talk about this matchup. I think it just makes so much more sense to talk about like a potential playoff matchup between these two
because
teams.
Like we could break down like the hospital versions of these teams.
Duce McBride do against the Cavs on Sunday?
I think all the interesting talking points when you go Cavs Knicks is in the macro, right? Because like I said at the start of the podcast, I think these teams are going to be around for a long time. Like how that looks has changed, because I really did like the young guys that you had. Like I was like, there's a lot of that upward mobility. Maybe you trade a couple of them. I was surprised at like trading away Grimes for Bojan, but at the same time, like I kind of get it, because this year had been weird for Grimes. But like when you've moved on from so much of that young core that I liked, it changes the calculus, but you still have all of those assets to go out and bring in another star. So it's a more kind of conventional approach from what I'm used to from Knicks. But like OG's still young enough. Like he's still got upside. Like you have to deal with him missing 30 games a year, because that's just kind of been what it's been with OG. But when he's healthy, he's going to make a big difference for you. So I do think the Knicks are going to be around for a long time. I think the Cavs are going to be around for a long time. So all the interesting topics are always macro to me.
Yeah. And I want to the Knicks fan that probably got offended by me saying Duce McBride's name, because he's actually been outstanding lately. Maybe it's the Alec Burks of it all that may not factor into a series upcoming.
Has Burks been bad? I like.
Oh my gosh! So fan favorite. We loved Alec Burks when he was here. There's this weird dichotomy with Burks where he's a Tibbs favorite. So like year one, he would just come off the bench and it was like an Alec Burks heat check every night. Like is this the game he's going to score 28 off the bench? Great. Well, he's going to close in the 4th quarter. And then the second year, because Kemba was so bad, Tibbs went to Alec Burks at point for the majority of the season when Emmanuel Quickley was right there. And I think there's a PTSD with Knicks fans that's like, oh, like he's going to rely on Alec Burks more than he should, because he decided that Emmanuel Quickley wasn't ready to be the point guard of the team. And our thought was like, whether he's ready or not, the season's going nowhere. Let's find out. And that move was never made. And then this year, I will say his minutes have started to go down and down recently. He only played 11 minutes against the Warriors on Thursday. But Tibbs also made this comment after the game, like, "Oh, I probably should have played him more. Look at his net rating and his and we just like, Tibbs, he's a -40 since coming here. What are you talking about? He's shooting like 28%. And like from talking to some people in the know, it's like, yeah, he's trying to support one of his favorite veteran players. Like, he loves Alec Burks. So I think there's a fear there. But my gosh, has he been bad since coming to the Knicks? I think he's a bit miscast. I think they brought him here to be a catch and shoot 3-point shooter, to be an initiator at times in the second unit.
Because the initiating to me, like that's why I like the pickup for the Knicks. Like I thought it was really, really important for them to get that, because they lost so much initiation.
Yeah.
Like even though RJ Barrett was inconsistent, he was someone that can generate rim pressure. He could get to the line. Like he was able to put the ball on the floor a little bit. And you guys kind of lost that. Like with him quickly and all those guys kind of going out. It's okay. There's a big burden on Brunson and DiVincenzo, who's been terrific.
Yeah.
So adding Alec Burks as that third guy that can initiate, I thought was really, really important because for all of OG's strengths, he can't put the ball on the floor. Like his isolation numbers and his shot creation is not great. So you're going to need to generate that in other ways. And the Knicks were such an ISO heavy team last year that like it changed kind of the floor balance questions that I had about them. So I thought Burks' initiation really was going to help because you got now 3 guys that can put the ball on the floor and a lot of intelligent players. Like OG is going to make the right plays. Bojan's going to make the right plays. So Randall, I think, has been a little underrated the last 2 years in terms of how good he's been. And then you got smart passing Isaiah Hartenstein too, right? Like, so I thought you had enough with that. So I'm really interested to see if he finds his footing because I do think Alec Burks is actually going to be important for you guys in a playoff context.
I got to be honest. I think it might go the other direction if he keeps playing like this. And I do think they're going to wait until the full roster is back before making any type of decisions. Like they're going to see what he looks like next to Randall with OG making up for some of his defensive mishaps. You know, just he's a bit of a traffic cone at the moment. They're going to give it a chance when you see him next to Randall and just provides the spacing that a guy like him and a guy like Bogey were brought here to do. I am increasingly becoming more intrigued by what Duce McBride has been since the Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett trade. He's not a point that can run your offense, but he's just a basketball player that you can play next to Jalen Brunson. I think that was part of the calculation in the Quentin Grimes trade, to be honest, that what Duce has been like, he can match the level of defender to an extent that Quentin Grimes was. I think Grimes is better, especially at the point of attack, and it with some screen navigation. But like what Duce had been this year just seemed to be like good enough that you could justify using Grimes as an asset to potentially raise your ceiling from a veteran standpoint. I'm at the point with Burks where it's like eventually you're going to have to give us an Alec Burks game because you're the scapegoat at the moment. You're the punching bag amongst Knicks fans. And
Cavs legend, Alec Burks.
Cavs legend. Yeah, he's a lot of legends in a lot of places for Alec Burks.
If I'm not mistaken, he hit a game winner in his first shot with the Cavs. So that was always fun.
Did he really? Oh, so
yeah, I think so.
That sounds exactly like the Alec Burks experience. He was here very shortly, but we have a memory of him when he was here. Do you have any other Knicks thoughts or questions? It's funny how I remember the first time we talked this year, it was very much like I'm curious about the upward trajectory that could potentially exist in an RJ and a Quickley, like what this team could become. And I was like, listen, that may be what this season is. And you know, somewhere around December, like the end of December, they were like, all right, we've plateaued with this. Something needs to be done. And obviously they made a move. You know, what was your reaction to that move and the shift that the Knicks made then?
My reaction was, holy crap, a Cavs-Knicks series might look very different than it did last year. Mm-hmm. And not from like a fearful of the Knicks. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful here because I think anyone listening understands that I think the Knicks are third best team in the East.
Mm-hmm.
I think just how a series would look is going to be a lot different because the Knicks, as good as Robinson is, as good as Hartenstein is, as good as OG is defensively, there's a lot of guys that you can kind of pick on a little bit. And the complexion, like the Cavs are all of a sudden this high volume 3-point shooting team. Like since Garland and Mobley came back in the games where the core four is all playing, I know people are like, oh, like they haven't played the same since they got back. No, in the first 10 games before the All-Star break, they got better offensively and defensively, and they took 39 threes a game. They're taking 39 threes a game when all 4 of those guys are playing, which I think is, you know, the important thing. Cavs are a high volume team, and the Knicks, like I think the Bojan addition is going to really help when you're healthy, unstick the offense at times. Because sometimes, you know, it would get bogged down. I think the Knicks became a much more dynamic offensive team. So it's not going to be a rock fight like it was. Like I think there's still going to be aspects of that because these are still like a Tibbs team and a JB Bickerstaff team. Like defense is going to come into the equation and there's going to be physicality and whatnot. But I just think like we might get a lot of really high scoring games between these teams in a playoff series, or at least by the standards of the playoffs, because we know scoring is going to go down in the postseason. yeah, I just think it's a much, much more interesting matchup. I was curious about, okay, who's Bojan going to be playing with? Like, is he going to be playing a lot of power forward? Is he taking Randall off the court, or is he playing at small forward and OG's playing at shooting guard? Like, there's so many different ways that this can go. And like, the funny thing is, even though I really want to beat you guys, like I really do, I don't have hatred for the Knicks. Like I have respect for the Knicks. I want to beat you guys. I want to, like change the narratives and whatnot. But it's not like Boston or the Warriors, or where just like, I can't stand what you guys got going on. Like I want both teams to be at their best, and I want to see what it ends up looking like, because I think it's almost like an iron sharpens iron thing, where like the little arms race between these teams and the matchups we have in the future. I really think it's going to make both teams better in the long run.
I think that's mutual, and this is just the temp check I get from Knicks fans, that last year's playoff series is still so very fresh, which is what I alluded to with are people taking the Cavs seriously enough that it's like, well, we're afraid of the Celtics. Like the Bucks will have the best player in the series, but of course we'll beat the Cavs because we beat them last year. Not factoring in like a year later, things could go differently, So I think there's some of that with Knicks fans. I don't have any
fans would do the same thing. Like even if it was different, like I think that's normal, right? Like we're going to need to prove it. Like that is what it is. It's a totally different team. There was a whole lot of things going on that year, but at the end of the day, like I still think you want to prove, like from a Cavs standpoint, I actually thought the Bulls game was really, really important, because the Cavs got out rebounded by just an insane margin. And some of it remind me of the Knicks series, where the Bulls misses were just so bad that it got like these wild rebounds and stuff like that. And the PTSD just came out from all the Cavs fans. It's, oh my God, like, is this going to happen again? Are we going to get punked on the glass? And went through it where I looked at how the Cavs have gone against top 10 offensive rebounding teams. Cavs are, going into that game, they were 7th in defensive rebound percentage. So I was like, are you just kind of doing that against the best or the worst rebounding teams, and that's helping your numbers? They've done great against the best offensive rebounding teams in the league. Like the Knicks only rebounded like 1% higher than their season average, and Jared Allen wasn't playing in either of those games. But I was sitting there and I was like, this is an important reminder that you can still get punked. Like I think people, it's kind of like black and white in their mind, when really it's going to come down to execution. Just like in the first couple games after the All-Star break, the Cavs only took like 23s, and automatically the questions were, is this because Mobley and Allen are on the court? Is it Garland and Mitchell? Is it blah, blah, blah? No, it's just about having confidence and executing. The Cavs, when they're locked in and everybody's committed to rebounding, you're going to go out there, and they've been great this year. They're 11th in contested rebound percentage. Their defensive rebounding numbers are great. Mobley's gone from 88th percentile to 93rd percentile on the defensive glass. He just had a 22, 17, and 7 game last night. Like he's averaging career best in every single category. Like he's making progress. But that doesn't mean you can't go back to old habits. That doesn't mean you can't, when things get tight, stop running the offense and playing hero ball. That doesn't mean you can't get beat up on the glass and have poor point of attack defense. Like it's going to come down to execution. So I thought it was a really important reminder that no matter how much progress you make, you can fall back in those bad habits. So it'll be really interesting to see how that translates over these next couple months and obviously in the postseason.
So as we wrap up, but first I want to tell people who aren't aware of what the rebound number was on Wednesday night last week or earlier this week when they played the Bulls. It was 74-39 was the final rebounding number, which was jarring to us. That was a double overtime game. So I'll say that it took 2 extra periods to get to that point. But these are the things that the regular season is for, to have moments like this so you recognize, oh, this can happen. And,
like it's 3rd and 4, or I think 5th and 7 or whatever, where they travel between every single one of those games. Oh, yeah. You're a little tired. Andre Drummond starting at power forward for some reason. Like there was understandable reasons, but that's what it's going to come down to, right? Like when you're tired, are you still doing the right things? And even at the end of that game, obviously, Donovan Mitchell it playing hurt, which we didn't realize at the time was a factor. I just thought it was the illness. But the offense stagnated down in the clutch. And I was like, hey, like, you got to make sure when you're tired, you're still getting that movement. You're still like catching the ball with advantage and not attacking a set defense. And I think they've done a good job of that this year compared to last year. Like, their tempo is so much higher. They actually play faster when Mobley and Allen are on the court. Like, their fastest lineups are that starting five. And I think that's an understanding of JB Bickerstaff of, hey, like, if we get out and run with this group, it's going to help make sure that like the offense doesn't get too muddy and stuff like that. Like, I think that's a really kind of smart thing. And even the game against the Kings, where we were sitting there the whole game and we're like, man, this Kings offense is amazing. This is unbelievable. Like, they're hitting absolutely everything. The Cavs were up 15-16 the entire game. We're like, we must be doing something good offensively too. But I think in the past, the Cavs would have got to the fourth quarter, seen that they're up 15 and just slow the ball down. Like, okay, this Kings offense is awesome. Let's really milk the clock, use it to our advantage. And they still played with tempo. They're like, okay, we don't care. We're still going to play our game. And I think that's going to be the biggest question for me is, do the Cavs play their game or do they get away from it when the pressure is on?
Well, if only we could get a good playoff preview in this game on Sunday night. Unfortunately, we'll have to settle for whatever version of the Knicks show up and whatever version of the Cavs shows up to see what both teams have learned since it's been so long. Justin, we were talking about this team on Halloween. That's the last time we discussed these basketball teams. Last thing before you get out of here, I usually ask like a Mount Rushmore or top five. Big enough sample size. Give me your top four MVP. Well, okay. The fourth probably actually, give me your top five, because the fifth one I think is the one that has the most variance. So your top five MVP candidates.
I think right now I'm giving Jokic the nod. He would be number one. Giannis, I'll have number two, even though the Bucks haven't been that good. Like, he's just having such a great season that I have Giannis right there. I'm Canadian as hell, so I'm going to go Shea as third. Shout out to him. He's having a terrific season. Fourth, Tatum. I think Tatum's got a little bit of a bad rap at times. The numbers are down, but I think Boston's just been so good. I still value winning. Like, I wouldn't have had Scotty Barnes in the All-Star game. Like, I think winning should matter in this kind of stuff. And then, man, like, I think Mitchell deserves more credit than he's got this year for how good the Cavs have been. Like, you got to credit somebody for this.
Yeah.
And like, his defense has been so good. His playmaking's been so good. I still think I'd give the nod to Luka just because Luka's having a ridiculous season, but I got to give a shout out to Donovan. I think he absolutely should be in the conversation for top five. At the very least, I think first team All-NBA should be a serious consideration, because he's just been out of his mind. Like, his commitment to the defensive end, like, one of the biggest questions people always have is, how's the defense going to hold up with Garland Mitchell? I'm like, well, they did have the best defense in the regular season. They had the best defense in the playoffs, and they have a 108 D rating with both of them on the court. Like, that's not a question to me, because Garland will play solid defense for his size. Mitchell is now committing to being a better defender. So I think his growth as a passer and the consistency of hose defense this year really deserve credit, because he's having the best season of his career once again.
I think those are the six. Like, those are in contention with obviously Embiid not in the mix anymore because of games missed. Is there any worry that Mitchell? I mean, he's at 12 missed games now, so he can only miss 6. I believe 5 more the rest of the year. Is there any worry that he might not qualify for All-NBA with the new rules?
A little bit. There's a very real chance that like the only awards candidates for the Cavs that are going to be eligible are like Caris for 6th Man of the Year, which I think he'll be in the running, but he won't win. Jared Allen, all defense. I think he might have a chance there because you're going to need to give it to someone from the Cavs. And as I said, he's having the best year of his career. And JB for Coach of the Year. Like, I think that's really what it's going to come down to. So, like there's some concern, but ultimately, like, he's not going to win MVP, so I don't worry about that. All defense would be very disappointing. I mean,
All-NBA, you mean for All-NBA for Mitchell?
Yeah, missing an All-NBA team would be disappointing for sure. So, I mean, I hope he's eligible because I want this team to get enough games healthy together that they're like ready for the playoffs.
Right.
Man, it's amazing. You mentioned it before we started recording how the season feels like 7 or 8 different seasons. Like Garland and Mobley missed 14 games and there's 23 left. Like there's still so much damn season left. I think the Cavs have a stretch where they play 17 games in a row without playing in the same city twice. Like,
oh, wow.
Yeah, like that's basically from March 15th until the end of the year. The first time they play in the same city is a back-to-back in LA, and that's basically how it ends. So that's going to be a really, really challenging stretch for them. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I think having the 2 seed to try to contend for is important because it gives you that regular season goal, and a little different than last year where they kind of locked up where they were in the seeding. They lost the ability to catch Philly, and then you kind of coast for 2 weeks, and then you have a week and a half off before the first round, and then all of a sudden you're locked in a rock fight with the Knicks. I think having something to compete for down the stretch will do this team some good.
So just to give Knicks fans who are unaware the context, so the Cavs play 5 of the next 6 at home. Then from March 13th, they're in New Orleans. From that game until April 10th, which there'll be 3 games left at that point, they don't play back-to-back games at home. Or like you said, in the same city or even the same state for that matter. So even like sometimes you make a road trip to California and you're playing like the Clippers and then 2 nights later, the Lakers. No, they're like Denver, Utah, Phoenix. Oh, no, they do that road trip on back-to-back days. But still, like that's the only time.
It's the end.
That's the end of it. So it's the Laker Clipper back-to-back April 6th and 7th. But it's all road games up until that stretch. So Knicks fans, if you had any illusions or maybe we'll say aspirations of catching the Cavs, that's the stretch. Now, I know this is a frustration of yours that the Knicks just like only played home games in January and parts of February.
You're like one road game was Brooklyn. I was ready to throw things.
That was fun. And then we went to Charlotte for the other road game and it was like, oh, that's MSG Carolina. Like that's technically going to be a home game too, So
well, I mean, we caught a break. So like some of this is like how many games the Cavs play in such a short period of time is because of the Paris trip, which was an advantage in one sense because they played 1 game in a week at a time where Garland and Mobley were missing 6 weeks. So that helped reduce the number that they missed. But yeah, this is the downside, I think, to some extent.
It helped that the team you played was also very much in mail it in mode for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Shout out little brother across the borough in Brooklyn.
I don't know why, like, I had so much aggression directed towards the Brooklyn Nets coming into this year, like in our preview podcast. Like I would just get so annoyed that everyone was like writing them in to be like the 6 or 7 seed. I'm like, oh yeah, why? They were not good after the McHale trade. Like that was not a playoff team that was just in the playoffs because of who they used to be. Like I got so annoyed and I'm very, very vindicated this season for how bad the Nets have been.
We technically, I think there's a portion of Knicks fans that feel the need to be easy on McHale because he went to Villanova and like all his best friends. I love
McHale.
All his best friends play for the Knicks. Yeah. So that's the narrative that gets pushed back on him. That it's like, all right, you're a good stats, bad team guy at the moment. Now we'll see like when you're.
But we know he's like a functional, like if you're talking. If you could pick like one wing to throw onto like any team, it's McHale, right? Like it
is, but like as a wing, not as like the second guy or exactly. Like I think if he's your best player, honestly, that we could talk about this when I'm on the chase down, but like the RJ conversation, like he's been outstanding since going to Toronto. They're 9-18 since he went to Toronto. So while they're focusing on just putting him in positions to succeed, like winning be damned. Like the Knicks were prioritizing this. You need to learn how to be a good floor spacer since that's not his role. You know,
it's so funny because like going back to the Mitchell conversation, this probably shows you how confident I feel about Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland, that I'm the one bringing it up a bunch of times. But like the Knicks moved all of their like young players that are interesting. Like I don't think the package would ever be like OG and a bunch of firsts, right? Like the Cavs are going, if they got forced into that situation, the players are going to matter more than the picks, and like a bunch of like first that might not convert and stuff like that. Like I think the Knicks, it's just pretty clear they kind of moved on and went a different direction. Like even if they consolidate for a star, I think it would be a different direction. And then the Heat, moved one of their only 2 first-round picks to go get Rozier. Like, I don't think they make that move if they're confident that, Mitchell's going to be on the market. And then Brooklyn's the only one that gets brought up. And I feel like that's disrespectful to Donovan, because everything you hear is his number one priority is winning. I don't think he cares about like being in a New York zip code for 41 games a year, because the other 41 you're on the road. I don't think he cares about that more than winning. Like, I think ultimately how much upside there is with the Cavs, how the fit goes, like how competitive they are, like that's the standard they're being held to. And frankly, that should be the standard with any NBA team. Like, if for a very good player that can be, a major piece on a championship winning team, that should be the standard, that you're continuing to improve. And like, for me, that's always what I focus on. I don't care about missteps. I don't care about failures. I don't care about, making mistakes, as long as on the macro I'm seeing growth and improvement. And I think what I've seen from the Cavs this season is a ton of improvement. Like, Isaac Okoro has made a leap. Evan Mobley has improved. Jared Allen's improved. Donovan Mitchell's improved. Darius is showing signs of getting back to himself. He's hit 15 of 26 threes in the last 2 games. So just him shooting at that volume again is really nice to see. So if he can get back to himself by the playoffs, and what we want to see is him get back to himself and then take that step forward and even improve as an off-ball player and be that high-volume three-point shooter. Because I think you saw in the one game that the Cavs won in the playoffs, when Darius is confident pulling from 3, it changes the geometry of the floor. Yeah. And the Cavs are a much, much better team. So excited for him to hopefully get back to himself, because I think that's the one biggest question for the rest of the year. Is I still think he's the guy that can level up this team more than anybody else, at least for this season.
Interesting. Well, if these two teams are ever healthy again, they don't play each other again the rest of the year, right? So this is actually going to be a tiebreaker game. I just realized that.
Yep.
Well, I know how I feel going into this game. I'm pretty sure I know how you feel going into this game as well. We'll see what happens the rest of the season. Before we get out of here, Justin, because you've been great with your time, please let the fine folks at home know where they can find you, the Chase Down, and any potential guests you might have coming up on the show in the future.
Yeah, we got an idiot coming on the show on Monday. That's going to suck. We go
proud
live.
To be that idiot, baby.
Yeah, we go live on the Cavs YouTube channel. You probably don't want to tune in. We'll be going live 8:30 Eastern. Really happy to have you back on the podcast. From an audio standpoint, you can find the podcast wherever you found this podcast. And you can find me on Twitter at Cavs. And I don't really tweet as much as I used to. I just don't get joy or anything out of it.
Twitter sucks. Yes, yeah, exactly.
Like it doesn't even drive traffic. Like I'm starting to be like, okay, where are the returns? Where are the returns for my emotional pain here?
I'll be totally honest with you, Justin. The only reason I use Twitter is like correspondence at this point, because like DMs. That's where I send the links, DMs. We have a Knicks Film School faculty chat that I hang out in, and that's it. Like at the moment,
that's what I use it for. Like, it's booking.
Exactly.
It's straight up podcast booking. Like that's where I have like 90% of my contacts. So, that's basically its only utility. But you can find me there. I'm a good hang. If you're sending me a thoughtful question or whatever, I'll probably send you a response.
I swear, if everybody at Knicks Film School had an iPhone, we would have made it a KFS like group chat, but because not everybody does, it's like it actually is easier to use Twitter. So shout out to the one person at Knicks Film School who has an Android. Hi, XJ.
Hey, Android man myself.
Oh, another one. No. It's 2024. Why do you guys we'll talk about this off the air. Okay. Thank you, Justin, for joining me for another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. And thank you to everybody for tuning in to another edition. If you dig the show, please like the video. Remember to subscribe. If you're listening, leave a 5-star rating and a review. I will be back on Tuesday morning with a preview show of the Knicks game against the Atlanta Hawks. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I will speak with you soon. Peace.